On any given day, we are inundated with probably a minimum of 10, upwards of 20, and maybe even more messages that are meant to motivate or inspire. But for a lot of people, while it may feel that way initially, it ends up not feeling like that so much any longer. And for people that have experienced childhood trauma, what it can leave you with is wondering, is it me or the message? And for most people, you're going to be left believing that it's you. Welcome, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. First of all, can you even relate to that? How often do you hear something, even if it's a good thing to hear, even if there's a lot of relevance to it, that it makes sense, and you might even feel kind of motivated or inspired by it, but ultimately you end up somehow not ending up feeling so great about yourself. I'm doing this video because, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but I'm doing it now because the other day when I was working out, the coach said something, and then again today, he said something somewhat similar. So I work out at home with a home gym system, but there's a coach, and he talks a lot during the workout about pushing through things and stuff like that. And he said the other day something along the lines of, you have to push through discomfort because that's where the growth happens. And on the surface, I would tend to agree with that. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think it's an important thing for people to understand. Today, when I was working out, it was kind of towards the end of the workout, so I was tired. And this is a strength-based workout, so it's a lot. But he said, you have to choose courage over comfort. And again, on the surface, I wouldn't say I choose courage over comfort, but on the surface, courage over comfort, again, something that I would probably generally tend to kind of agree with. However, I view nearly everything that I come across through the lens of, how does this potentially impact people? Good or bad, but I tend to notice the things that have potential to hurt or harm or reinforce things that are not helpful to reinforce. And so both times, the other day and today, I thought, I could imagine myself, I could imagine other people, men too, but I think even more so women. Anybody who's really, I guess, a little bit more self-aware, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but for somebody to hear that, it can feel inspiring. Like, yes, I'm choosing courage over fear or over comfort. Or yes, I need to experience this discomfort in order to experience growth. And so you push yourself. And there are times, physically and even emotionally, when we have to be able to do that. There are also times, particularly emotionally, but certainly also physically, when sometimes pushing through the discomfort isn't necessarily the best thing for you. And I would say that it's not about choosing courage over comfort, because it's not a conscious choice. And even when it comes to working out, you may be able to say to yourself, I'm choosing courage over comfort. It's not really courage that you're choosing. You're choosing to keep going. Now, why you keep going, there could be a lot of reasons for that. And one unfortunate thing that happens sometimes in this circumstance with working out or doing any sort of physical movement is that, yes, I'm going to choose courage over comfort, and you end up pushing yourself too far. Instead of just discomfort, you're pushing through pain. You're telling yourself, I should be stronger. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I just need to keep going because that's where the growth happens. I just need to keep going because what's on the other side will be worth it. And the same thing happens on an emotional or psychological level. And when it comes to pushing through discomfort or connecting to your courage so that you feel like you have the capacity to do something that feels uncomfortable or that creates fear, those things are important. And I talk about that a lot, right? That whether it's about feeling something, whether it's about practicing something, it's going to feel uncomfortable. But how do you know whether that discomfort is something to push through or something to notice, connect internally with, and recognize from a more grounded place what the best thing for you is? And I wish that there was a formula. I wish that there was a way to know with absolute certainty which it is. And that's part of the challenge in healing, is that there isn't. And so this comes up a lot in my work. It's come up in groups as well. But people wondering, like, is this discomfort? So we're talking more emotionally here. Is this discomfort something to push through? Or is this something that my gut is telling me not to do? Is this discomfort telling me that I need to rest instead of go out there and connect? And because there isn't a specific type of formula or certain way of knowing, you have to practice being able to connect within yourself to recognize, what are those cues? Is it your intuition? Is it your self-doubt? Is it your self-protection? Is it fear of vulnerability? Is it that you just don't really like that person? Like, there could be so many different things going on there. And part of how we get to knowing what is our mind, our heart, our body, our intuition telling us that we need to take a break, or we need to step back, or we need to give it some time, we learn how do I say this? We learn how to recognize that and trust it by practicing doing that. And that sometimes is a lot harder than pushing through some types of discomfort we might experience. But one thing that you might think about, and I think it can be easier to think about it in terms of our physical body, but if you think about like an exercise, and this could be like even just doing things around your house or something. So anything that will take maybe some strength, or the way that you're moving your body, right? Like when you bend down to pick up something, you're supposed to bend at your knees. You're not supposed to bend over just from your back and hinge. So if you think about it from a physical standpoint, and this is something that happens a lot in yoga, I do a lot of yoga, is that you want to push kind of to an edge where maybe there is some discomfort, where maybe you're feeling your muscle tension and you'd want to relax into the pose, or you're feeling some discomfort in the stretch, but you want to lean into that discomfort so that your body can experience that. You don't want to move past to get to a point of pain, because then you're actually potentially doing damage to the joint, the muscle, whatever it might be. But how do you know, right? And this is something that happens for a lot of people that are disconnected from their body in whatever way that might look, is that we can push ourselves. And this could even show up in, like I said, doing things around your house, carrying items or kids or something like that. Like, you push yourself through that because you think you should be able to do it. And then you end up pulling your back, or you end up feeling really bad for a while. But this kind of thing happens quite often. where we push ourselves. Sometimes we don't necessarily notice the pain, or we talk ourselves out of the pain. Tell ourselves it's not that bad. I should be able to do this. Other people can do this. I'm just complaining. I'm not choosing courage over comfort. I need to be stronger. The same thing happens on an emotional or psychological level, where somebody might say, like maybe they've committed to something, like they've said that they were going to, I don't know, help somebody in some way. And they will end up getting some sort of virus or something, and they're not feeling well, they're still recovering. Their body is not back to where it optimally would be. But they say, well, I committed to this and I can't back out, so I just need to make sure that I'm better. Meanwhile, they're probably not taking the best care of themselves. But they push themselves and they say, well, I have to go do this. I can't let this person down. It might be a situation in which it's not necessarily going to harm you to do that. But I know for a lot of people that have experienced childhood trauma, because we're taught that our needs don't matter, to ignore our needs, to ignore how our body is feeling, we tend to minimize the discomfort, the pain that we experience, and we push through that, whether that's physical pain or emotional pain. So like if you've been sick, you might try to push yourself really hard to just get better, to get over it, and start going back to your normal everyday life. When it comes to the emotional aspect of this can show up in a lot of different ways, but a couple of the most significant ways that I see it show up, where being able to discern which one it is, tends to be around boundaries. That's a really big one. And around pushing yourself to do things that are like practicing things that are certainly out of your comfort zone, but important practices for healing. So when it comes to boundaries, I've said this many times, but if it's somebody that you care about, if it's somebody that you've had a long relationship with, if the relationship has some unhealthy aspects to it, if you try to set a boundary with that person, you are very likely going to feel very uncomfortable with that idea. Even just the idea of it, but certainly the implementation of it. And that discomfort is coming from it being so out of the norm for you, maybe feeling out of character. So the discomfort is coming from the unknown. It's coming from doing something differently than you've always done it. And our self-protective aspect is going to kick in and say, not a good idea. And it might say just simply not a good idea. And that might be enough to get you to take a step back and say, now's not the right time, maybe later. Or if you say, I really need to do this, I really want to do this, the self-protection might kick in a little bit more strongly and say, that's a really bad idea. And who do you think you are? You're being really mean. They don't deserve that. What are people going to think? I'm a bad person if I don't want to be at this person's beck and call. I'm wrong for not wanting to put up with this anymore because I should have said something a long time ago. The more that we push through into that discomfort and are willing to push through that, the more our self-protection feels the need to be heard. And so the voice gets louder. The reasons or the evidence might get more emboldened, might be more significant in terms of what it's saying to you, how harsh it is being with you, because it's trying to keep you pulled back into a place of safety, into what it knows. And so that discomfort, when we're talking about setting boundaries, we're going to have to push through discomfort. We're going to experience it. We're going to have to push through it. We're going to have to deal with a consequence within ourselves and maybe even other things, but mostly within ourselves of doing that. But we can do that. And this is part of the reason why working with somebody can be really important, because if we're just trying to do it on our own, that self-protective voice is likely going to be a lot louder than that newer voice telling you that it's healthy, that you deserve it. So in a situation like that, pushing through that discomfort is important. And in some ways, it's going to be necessary in order for healing. But what about times in which pushing through the discomfort is not necessarily what's best for you right now? Well, even in the case of boundaries, if you are, let's say you're going through something pretty stressful in your current life, maybe you've lost a job, maybe you are having some difficulty with children, maybe you're having some difficulty with a relationship, or there's just a lot going on around you. And you're in therapy and you're talking about how this other person is taking advantage of you. Like, you can just look at it kind of, if you take a step back and look at the whole thing, you can say, yes, setting this boundary is important. But if you've got a lot going on, you're just trying to get through that right now, right? And so there's a lot of vulnerability that is built into that, because remember, so many things can make us feel vulnerable, can create vulnerability within our body and our capacity. So if there's multiple things going on or something really significant going on, that level of vulnerability is going to be really high. And let's say this boundary you want to set is with somebody that you don't necessarily have a lot of interaction with. That might be a time in which maybe working on setting that boundary or implementing that boundary, maybe not the best time to push through that discomfort too, because you're already experiencing a whole lot of discomfort. Now, if that person is part of this discomfort, if that person is part of what's creating the difficulty for you, that might be a little bit different. And this is, again, why having somebody with you through this is really helpful, because it can help you kind of see things a little bit more clearly, to know, to be able to kind of discern what is fear, what is old belief, what is shame, versus what this means to take care of myself right now. And again, there is no formula specifically for that. But one thing that you can consider that can be helpful is when you think about doing the thing, so whatever that discomfort is, when you think about doing that, the things that you're saying to yourself about it, to either do it or not do it, does it sound familiar? Does it sound like old beliefs or old fears, old shame? Is it repeating the things that you've been saying to yourself likely throughout your life? Or is it very similar? Or are you saying to yourself, I have got so much going on right now, I don't have time to deal with this. I don't have time to create another circumstance in which I'm feeling really vulnerable or feeling really guilty because I need to do this. Because that's a newer voice. That's likely a more healthy voice, right? Now, having said that, though, it is important, even with that potentially more healthy voice, recognizing that that's still something you want to do. That's still something that will be good for you. So you're not saying, I can't do that. You're saying, I'm choosing not to do that now. So the whole idea of choosing courage over comfort, sometimes choosing what's best for you in that moment is what is important. And maybe that is comfort. Maybe that is taking care of yourself with the things that you can't have any control over right now. Maybe it's putting your energy into just being able to get through the day, whatever that might be. But thinking about the voice that you're hearing in your head or the reasons that you're coming up with, are they familiar to those old beliefs and fears, or are they more connected to what you're learning about being deserving and being worthy? Are you consciously choosing it because it truly feels like it's probably the right thing for you? And the same kind of thing can happen. This is the other area where it tends to show up often, is where somebody might feel alone or lonely, or maybe just feel like they don't have a lot of people in their life that they feel truly connected to, or maybe even anybody in their life. And so part of the healing and part of the practice for that healing is having to push yourself, having to reach out, having to respond, having to say yes to people, right? Like being able to risk being vulnerable with somebody to share something, even if it's just, I had a hard day, right? It doesn't have to be everything. It could be simply, it was a bad day, or I'm actually not feeling too well today, instead of saying, I'm fine. Those things matter too. It doesn't have to be really big stuff. So for a lot of people, and that people will sometimes say, well, I'm an introvert, so it really drains me to be around people. And that's a real thing. But what I have discovered in my work over these years is that somebody could still be an introvert, and that can sometimes be a little bit of an excuse, because what they will say to themselves is, well, I just don't have the energy right now. I just really want to enjoy being home on my own. And there can be some truth to that as a general kind of idea. But what happens often is people will say that I just really prefer to stay home. I enjoy my own company. But if that's a pattern where you never really allow yourself opportunities to connect, and it doesn't have to be a group of people, then there might be a little bit more going on. So what will happen sometimes is people will think, well, I had a really kind of long week, or I'm going to have a busy week, and I don't really want to go meet my friend for coffee, for example. And that can be a very valid thing. And it can often be an excuse. So how do you know which one it is? Well, there's no formula. But are you tending to fall into old patterns, what you're used to, what feels safe? Are you tucking yourself into that based on old thought patterns? Or are you really checking in with yourself and thinking about where you're at, what you want, maybe a part of you might want, and making a choice from there? Because it's a very real thing, especially if you've been having a lot of emotional ups and downs, if you're just on this healing journey generally, it is very real that it takes a lot of energy. And the idea of going out, especially if it's among a lot of other people or a lot of different things throughout the week, that can feel exhausting. And that's real, and that is important to pay attention to. But do you have to say no to everything? Maybe you say no to all but one thing. Or maybe you think about, okay, these are the days that I have things going on, or on this night, I really like to just be home for whatever reason. You like what's on TV, or the middle of the week, you like to just kind of give yourself a little break, or whatever it is. And then think about, how can I try to create a circumstance in which I can make sure to connect. And again, it can be a message. It doesn't have to be actually interacting in person, in real life with somebody, though I think that there are times that that can be really important. But again, it can be one person. It doesn't have to be a group of people. So thinking about that, so creating opportunities where maybe you do push yourself through some discomfort to do something that you know is going to be good for you, even if it doesn't necessarily feel great in the moment. So you have to also be discerning about who are you spending time with, because if it's somebody you need to set a boundary with, probably not the best person to be spending time with when you need to practice connection. So all of those things are really important. And ultimately, I think it's also really important to recognize when you are taking in information, whether you're reading a newspaper or you're watching videos or reading the latest self-help book, whatever it might be. And this goes for stuff that I say as well. When you hear it and it's something, it's like a suggestion of how you should or what you need to do in order to feel better or have the life you want, recognize that there's always, no matter who's saying it, no matter what they're saying, there's always going to be some aspect of nuance to that. Doesn't mean that it may not be real and true, but there may be some nuance that suggests that maybe sometimes it makes more sense for that than other times. Maybe for certain people in certain periods of life, it might make more sense. Maybe there are times that it's not best to do that. So all of those things are really important. I think it's also helpful to recognize, how do those types of things make you feel? So like the idea of choosing courage over comfort, like, does that feel inspiring? Does it feel like it gives you energy and a sense of lightness in moving toward that? Or does it feel like, yes, that's what I need to hear. I should have been doing that all along. What is wrong with me? And of course, what you say to yourself might be different in both of those circumstances. But notice that there's probably a different energy behind those things. And it doesn't mean that the message has to be completely wrong, but maybe it's just not right for you in that moment. And the unfortunate reality is that there are a lot of people, and this coach did mention this. He talked about, it might have even been somewhere else I heard him say this, but he talked about like sports psychology, or how did he say it? But he actually mentioned the word psychology. And I thought, this is part of the challenge in the time that we are in, because there's so much information out there that people can have an understanding of something. We all have a partial understanding of something. Like, none of us can have absolute every piece of knowledge that there is about something. And that certainly goes for me as well. But we can have a piece of information about something. We can even maybe understand it in the context of something. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to apply to all contexts, to all people, for all circumstances. And that's one of the things that I think is often missed when it comes to mental health, and certainly when it comes to trauma and healing. Because we are so inundated by, and often very well-meaning people, and people who think that, well, this was really helpful to me, and so therefore this is what everybody else needs to hear. And sometimes there can be a lot of value in that, but what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else. And just because it may not work for you, or because you may not feel the same way as everybody else might seem to feel about it, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. And that is one of the most, I think, unfortunate things that can happen, is that it often does leave the person who maybe it isn't a great fit for, it leaves that person believing that there's something wrong with them. They take that as another piece of evidence that it's me. I'm weak. I'm not getting it. I don't deserve it. Whatever it is that you might say to yourself. So I hope that was helpful. I hope if you find yourself hearing some of those kinds of things, that you do give yourself a moment to recognize how it feels and how you can apply it, and when maybe it's not the best time to try to apply it. I'd love to to hear from you. I'd love for you to share in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.